Guessing, where's he traveling now? Do you know?
He's in
Where's he going?
Colorado. He's in Colorado. So the man is on a worldwide tour right now with his tug of war rope, jacked Santa Claus, going to all these different locations, getting dudes to just stand on the side of a 100-foot rope. No, he's in Colorado. I think he's meeting with the crew from Black
Oh,
Rifle
Black Rifle,
Coffee,
right. Very cool.
and he trained with Logan Stark this morning.
Nice.
But yeah, we were in Chicago, and then he was over in Richmond, Virginia, right? Richmond, Virginia.
That's right.
Yep,
Yeah, it
and
was
then back to
CBP stuff.
California. Yep,
Man, the guy's all over the place, racking up those
always.
miles. But the show must go on. The home team is here. I know Dennis had his daughter's graduation. He said he might jump on, but he's not here. But I'm excited to talk today, man. Title of the live. So we're live again, which is super exciting. So if anyone is listening to this live, I know producer Liz is going to hit us up with any questions or comments as we go.
Producer Liz on the mic. I love producer Liz in the
Dude, we
background. It's the
definitely got to
best.
get producer Liz on the mic. The best part was when we wrapped up last episode, and the first thing she said when we wrapped up was like, "I can't wait to shoot up with BPC 157." It's the best.
Producer Liz is doing the PEDs behind the screen, man.
Oh man, producer Liz just juiced. I love it. No, but the ideal number of training days to get jacked, man, and this was inspired. At least I really want to talk to this with you because I know that there's going to be a new program hitting the app in the
Yeah.
very near future. It's kind of been like an idea, something you've been super passionate about for a while. So I want to talk to you about that, the thinking behind that, because I think it falls in line with this idea of like, how much do you really need to train for goal X? And we can kind of get into that for a second. But for me, the reason I wanted to talk about it, it's like super front of mind. There's a podcast I listen to. It's called Eat, Train, Prosper. Really like those guys. And they had a really cool episode where they went back to like the history. Both of these guys are like super into bodybuilding, like trained for shows. They're kind of like very much on that side of it. And they really like going into like the science of training and all that stuff. So if you like geeking out on that, definitely go check them out. But they did an episode specifically talking about the pre-steroid era. So we're talking about like the 1920s, 1910s, like the guy that invented the hack squat machine like way back in the day. And the interesting thing was you look back at those pictures and dude, those guys were super jacked.
Yeah,
Obviously
nice
not
stuff.
like, like once you get into the Arnold days and everyone was using all sorts of, actual PEDs, the physique just like completely exploded. But you would look at those guys and by any, you know, realistic standard, they're like super lean and super jacked and super strong. And the interesting thing was back then, the gold standard training protocol for those guys was 3 times a week, full body. So
Wow.
there was no like chest day, there was no arm day, there wasn't training 5 times a week, 6 times a week. They were getting in 3 times a week. And the interesting thing too that they were talking about is all these guys, because it was impossible to make a living back then off of fitness, there was just something they did, they would train and then go on about their day. Everyone had a full-time job, everyone was doing their stuff. And then they were also talking about, and this was interesting too, on the flip side though, because you would say they don't have that much time to train, that makes it almost harder to get results. But on the flip side, back then, they were probably, waking up and going to sleep with, sunrise and sundown. Weren't staring at a screen. Food options in general back then were just whole food. Like there wasn't, like junk wasn't even accessible. So
Yeah.
they had a lot of advantages, disadvantages. But long story short, it got me really thinking to, the average dad that we talk to, or just the average guy that we talk to. I feel like a big pain point is like, well, I don't have time, right? Like you don't have time to train 6 times a week. You don't have time to train 2 hours, even 90 minutes per session. But then the question is like, do you even need that much time? Do you need that much repetition? Do you need to be at the gym every single day? I know
Yeah.
before we hit record, you were talking about, do you need to be at the gym 2 times a day? You know, what some people are doing. Like, what are you actually spending that time on? Is it moving the needle?
Yeah.
And are there other things that are more important? So anyway, what's kind of your thought there? And then I think this would
Dude,
be a good conversation.
what an amazing lead in there, first of all. So I have to check out the podcast from those guys. Eat, Train, Prosper, you
Eat, Train,
said?
Prosper, yeah, with Aaron Straker and Brian Bornstein, old
Okay, yeah,
SoCal
dude.
guys.
I've heard of Aaron Straker. Aaron Straker, for a long time, I followed him on social
Yeah.
media. He's got an incredible physique. Um, uh, That's such an interesting question, though. And I think one of the things when I was thinking about when you were talking here, man, is like, were those guys in the 20s and 30s at an advantage or a disadvantage? Because, like, I think you would take a lot of
You can kind of
guys.
make both arguments.
You could make both arguments for sure. You could make both arguments very, very easily here. I think you would take a lot of modern day people and put them back in that environment and be like, wow, this is impossible. How could I ever do this? How could I ever do it without supplements? How could I ever do it without dedicated gym time? How could I ever do it without 9,000 pieces of equipment, without my phone, without my Whoop, without my whatever, bro? And I think that there's something really special about
Without my Whoop made me crack up.
yeah, dude, like I can't train as hard today because my strain score is too high. Like I think that that's all my personal opinion on some of this stuff is that there's a lot of things that we consider now as being completely necessary to the training environment that I don't know how necessary they are if your goal is to be athletic, lean, strong, and a high functioning human being. If you wanted to have a healthy, lean, and fit body, and you wanted to look a certain way that was, you look at some of these guys from the 20s and the 30s, and they're certainly not as big as Arnold got, right? Like Arnold got to a whole new level. Arnold and those guys from that era in the late 60s, into the 70s, into the 80s, and then the 80s, the 90s, into the 2000s is like a whole different ball game. But when Arnold came on the scene, man, like you just never saw anything like it. When he was 16 years old, he was bigger than almost all of these guys who had been training for decades before him. So the outcome is going to be different, I think, with the type of training that we're discussing here that you mentioned, this 3 day a week, full body type of session. I'd want to know, and I wrote a note down here, like what were these guys doing? Like what did their training sessions look like? What was the volume like? What were the movements like? What was the loading like? And I hate to be stereotypical about what that they would probably use, but like you think of those guys back in that day, you think of like the string singlet, the curly mustache, and you think about that barbell. It's got the two globes on the end of it. I bet they were using some shit that looked like that though. They probably had a couple of pairs of dumbbells. The modern barbell, I don't know when it was invented, but I think it was probably already around by then. But were the lifts just solely squat, back squat, deadlift, press? You see a lot of guys doing a lot of standing military press from that era. So I need to dig into it a little bit more, but I think the answer undoubtedly so for me here is the fact that yes, you can get super, super, super jacked doing 3 days a week of dedicated strength training, eating a certain diet that probably takes out some of the modern type of things that have been more popularized these days. Like if you just ate steak, fruit, vegetables, potatoes, all those like whole foods. And I think if you lived an active lifestyle, like if you got out and moved a whole lot, one of the things that I think was very characteristic of the guys that were training back then is, like you said, they all probably had jobs. A lot of them probably had jobs. Yeah, like this guy over here. They probably had jobs that necessitated them to be strong and utilize their physique and their strength on a pretty regular basis. So it's a really interesting question to me.
Yeah, they weren't going and sitting on a cubicle all day after they got their training session in. They were
No.
probably walking from place to place. They were doing something that involved them being active and having to like lift stuff and use their grip and all of those things throughout the day. So it's
Swinging
not like,
hammers at the building of the Empire State Building, bro. Like I was watching a YouTube video about the Empire State Building. They excavated the Empire State Building underneath, and they put in all those big couplings, all those steel. That was excavated by hand and by horse in a course of like 20 days. So human labor moving tons and tons, literally tons of rock and dirt. I bet a lot of these guys or people like them, man, were just fucking putting a spade into the ground and throwing it over their shoulder.
for me, what it kind of underlines is this whole idea, and I've talked about this for a long time, that it's just like effort is the most important thing when it comes specifically to hypertrophy and strength training for sure. And I mean, anything that you're trying to improve, like going through the motions just isn't going to do it. And obviously you can go on the extreme side of that and there's detriment to that. And if you want to specifically, improve cardiovascular endurance, then we're talking about more like specialist training. That's where like the zone 2 advocates come in, and it's like, well, you can't go hard all the time. There's more benefit to going like long and slow. There's nuance to all this for sure. But I think that if you were going to paint with a very general brush what people could benefit from the most, what I took away from all this is like, dude, if you're going in there and you're not just going through the motions and you're putting either something really heavy on the bar or finding a combination of tempo and mind body connection, it makes the set hard. Because I think that that's another thing, that there's very, very different ways to like make a set hard or take it to failure. It doesn't necessarily need to be, oh, this is, like I would fail if I did one more. I know that tempo is something that we all use. I know you use a lot, because if you do have minimal equipment or you're coming back from injury, or honestly, you're just like at an age where you want to like reduce the chance of more injury, like tempo's your best friend. Mike Israetel talks about it all the time, and he talks about it I appreciate how he brings it up, where he says so many people get caught up in like, well, where's the study that shows that like using tempo like increases, hypertrophy or strength? And he's like, all right, like, sure, the evidence for that is like, not really there, but the evidence for reducing the risk of injury is there. And guess what? If you don't get injured, you're going to get stronger faster. You're going to put muscle on faster. The biggest thing that derails people is, they'll go super hard for 4 weeks, then something comes up, whether it's like a really bad injury or just like a kind of just a little sprain or whatever. But either way, that's taking you away from the gym, and that's going to stunt your progress more than like, well, does tempo actually help or does it not? I don't do anything anymore without controlling the way down. Sometimes it's a super strict like 3-0 XO tempo. Sometimes it's not, but no more for me are the days of like bouncing out of a squat or like bouncing the bar off my chest or anything that like, okay, sure, I'll get the rep, but it wasn't done with some modicum of control. It just like doesn't exist in my training. I just don't do it anymore.
I think training intention is probably, aside from consistency, training intention, those two back to back would be the two most important factors for me in seeing the success of whatever plan or whatever goal you're trying to get to. And we've talked about this before on the show many episodes ago. Depending on the specificity of your goal, that will determine the specificity of your training. It has to. So if you have a very specific goal to run a 5-minute mile, and you and I went back and forth about this when we were doing the 10-minute bike test, right? Like the 10-minute bike test, can we get 6,000 meters in 10 minutes? And I was like, man, I'm going to try and train to see if I can get 6,000 meters in 10 minutes because it sounds really cool. It's really fucking hard to do, first of all. That was incredibly eye-opening, exponentially how much harder you would have to push yourself to get that extra 200 meters in the from the 5,800 or 5,900 to the 6,000. It's like that extra little bit is so hard to sustain there. And then it's so funny because if you fall off just a little bit, like the numbers drop so drastically below that. But if you have a very specific goal, the odds of you achieving it in the most efficient manner really do depend on how consistent you're going to be following a very specific plan. But my training goals are not very specific right now. I'm in a season of my life where I've gone through a couple of pretty big injuries. I had a hip injury that, because of genetics, I have a condition in my hip that wore down my cartilage a little bit faster, and ultimately I needed a right hip replacement at a fairly young age, at 38 years old, right? I was doing a lot of training at that time. I was doing the flex program the way that I had programmed it. I was doing jujitsu. I was rucking a whole lot. So I was putting a lot of volume and miles on my body, and my body, was forced to slow down. And then a few months ago in December of 2024, I ruptured my Achilles. And that, again, slowed down some of what I was doing and forced me to relook at training a little bit differently. And, through that recovery over the past 5 months now, I've really learned a lot about myself and what I enjoy about training and really what my goals are. Because I don't want to be saddled with injury. That's not something that I want to do. And both of those injuries, I believe that they were unavoidable. The hip injury was a congenital defect in the hip. Couldn't really avoid that. It was going to go at some point. The Achilles, I had warmed up very, very well for about 90 minutes of progressively maybe playing a little bit harder. I was playing pickleball. And unfortunately, I just moved my foot across my body and my Achilles snapped. And if you watch the NBA playoffs, Jason Tatum had almost the same exact injury. And that feels like it was just a random event, like the tissue got overloaded and it could have happened to anyone, anywhere, at any time. Seeing Jason Tatum rupture his Achilles was really eye-opening to me because you're talking about a talent in the NBA that is very, very high up on the list. I mean, top 5 player in the NBA. So this dude has access to every single rehabilitative method, every single physical therapist, every single massage therapist. He was probably very well warmed up before the game. They probably worked on him at halftime, and it just went. His Achilles just snapped. He stepped the wrong way, and his Achilles snapped. So interesting. But my goals for training right now, man, is I want to feel and perform like an athlete. I want to be able to go out there and whether it's swim in the ocean and be very dynamic in the ocean. I want to be able to step onto the jiu-jitsu mats. I want to be able to be an athlete there. I want to feel strong. I want to feel limber. I want to look good with my shirt off. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that a lot of people who get into fitness, there's obviously an aesthetic thing that is connected to it. And I don't think aesthetic goals are bad. I think that it just depends on what you're interested in. But for me, I don't need like a very structured, formal 5, 6, 7 day a week thing. It almost impacts me negatively. So the type of training that I'm doing probably aligns up a lot more to what these guys were doing in the 20s and the 30s, much more closely than what I see modern people doing.
For sure. For sure. And one of the things that I remember listening to on the podcast too, as you were talking about that stuff, is like a big differentiator was back then they didn't even have like squat racks or anything. Like they literally had to just be strong enough to put the barbell on their back to then kind of squat with that. There was just a much bigger necessity for just like all sorts of odd object strength, if you will, instead of like everything being very like, okay, you're going to take the barbell off the rack, like perfect position, squat, but like when are you really training how you would pick something up in real life or anything like that? And 100%. I think that there's obviously the argument to be made that that kind of stuff doesn't like isolate muscles as well, and if hypertrophy is specifically your goal. But again, I think that people get too wound up in like what's optimal when they're not even scratching the surface of the high impact basics, which do just come down to, you know, and you can give CrossFit a lot of credit here, big compound movements, things that are using a lot of muscles, a lot of CNS demand. The problem is that you can't, like you literally can't do that 5-6 times a week. I think that that's another place where like the 3 times a week program that these guys were following was almost necessary for the type of training they were doing, because they were going 100% every time, and everything they did required such a high, you know, like demand, both structurally and like nervous system wise, that like you can't really do more. And I think that that's also where people trip up, because they'll say that like, well, you can't do that, you know, all the time. And it's like, you're right, you can't. That's why 3 days a week might be better if that's the kind of stuff that you're doing. Like people almost end up doing more for the sake of doing more, and that completely takes away from even the impact that you can have from 3 of those 5 training days, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that there's an obsessive culture with going. I mean, I think that there's an element of obsessive culture of training and needing to be in the gym and never feeling like you're doing enough. I think that plagues a lot of people. And I think that if you're doing a three day a week program, it could feel like, oh man, but what am I doing on like the other 4 days that like I'm not getting my gains. I'm not working hard enough. And I think that if going to the gym is a very therapeutic thing for you and it's an outlet for you and you feel like it's a social environment and you enjoy it, I would never tell somebody to not go to the gym. But in terms of the effective dose that you would need in order to produce a very athletic and lean, strong physique, I do think that it's the training volume necessary for that is much lower. The formal training volume is lower. I do think that movement outside of training, activity outside of training, the things that you do outside of all that, I think that that levels up into getting to a place that your physique looks like that. And I don't know if we move enough outside of those training environments in like a 3-day-a-week program where you could only train 3 days a week, and then the other 4 days, if you're not doing literally anything, if you're just pounding calories nonstop, I don't know, that would be an interesting experiment too. Can somebody like just pound calories and rest nonstop on the days that they don't train with a really hardcore, very intense 3-day-a-week strength program? What would the outcome of that be? It could be a tremendous physique if it was done right.
If it's done right and if it's the right person with the right training aids. Because another thing that I've learned about this stuff is that it's a very, very much a learned skill to hit the type of intensity that you need to, that like these guys were probably hitting, and that like you would need in your example to really be able to get enough out of those sessions to where just the recovery and eating the other days doesn't like completely overshadow how much you actually worked. Because I mean, you know this from being years as a coach, when beginners come in and you're like, hey, give me, your 5-rep max back squat, whether it's because of, technique or just discomfort with the bar or just like not being familiar with like what is actually like their max heaviness or their joints not being ready, they're not actually going to hit what is actually the 5-rep max. Whereas you have someone that's been doing this for 10 years and you're like, hey, give me like a 5-rep max. That one set of 5 could be it is plenty of stimulus to create significant adaptation, to require a good amount of recovery as needed before the next session. So I think that kind of depends on it too. Is like, who are you talking about? Someone that's like relatively new, has taken some time off, or someone that has a very high training age. And when you say, hey, you're going to do a really intense session today, they even have the ability to do that, the skill to do that, and like the prerequisite, joint stability, joint health to do that without like completely risking injury. I think that's a big piece too.
I'm not trying to bash modern training. I've done a lot of modern training.
Well, what's modern training?
Well, barbell, squat rack, loaded machines, plate loaded machines, leg press, everything that you would see when you walked into a modern gym environment. I think all of those things are fantastic. I love the fact that you have so many options to build whatever type of physique you want to build. One of the things that I do believe, though, is that when you're faced with moving something outside of the gym, whether or not you have to pick up, like if there's a heavy boulder that you have to move in your garden, or like you have to get like the bags of mulch from the pile at Home Depot into a cart, or you're picking up a couch with your buddy, or you're literally like farmers carrying 2 things or 2 buckets or whatever it is. If you just think about the use of your body outside of the gym, not very often are you faced with picking up something that looks and feels like a barbell. A barbell is a fantastic training tool to develop a tremendous amount of strength. It's undoubtedly one of the best training tools ever invented. It allows you to overload a symmetrical object and put a tremendous amount of weight that's balanced really well, that in most circumstances you can move very, very safely at humongous loads. But not very often outside of the gym are you ever looking at something that's shaped like that or feels like that. Like it just doesn't exist. So when you go to utilize your strength, the barbell obviously builds up a tremendous amount of resilience, a tremendous amount of muscle. If you're training properly, you understand how to engage your midline, you understand how to get into really good positions. But if you just think about, let's say you have a 150-pound object that's circular, whether it's a stone or whether it's a rock or whatever, simulating something that outside of the gym you could encounter that you have to move. There's no way that the technique that you use to pick up a barbell can be applied in a one-to-one way to pick that up. It's just not possible. You're not able to set your back in a way that you would set your back to pick up an equivalently heavy barbell. With the objects that are shaped like that, man, you've got to get your forearms almost completely underneath this type of object. You got to roll your forearms. Your body curves around the object. You're trying to get the object as close to the midline as possible to literally get as much leverage on the object as you can to try to get it up your shins, to lap it on your thighs, to then bring it to your waist in a bear hug, to then maybe, if you can, hoist it up onto your shoulder or whatever. But you're certainly not picking that motherfucker up with two hands gripping. You're not gripping it because there's no grips. You're not lifting it in one straight line to your waist. You're rounding yourself around the object and then trying to get it to probably one shoulder or the other. So all of that being said, the only thing that I'm saying, yes, would a person who knows how to lift a very heavy barbell probably have better success at lifting that stone than somebody who doesn't? Of course. But practicing lifting objects like that without the perfect anatomical natural S curvature of the spine, without necessarily thinking about, oh, how do I now get this object from my shins to my waist in one straight line? I think that there's a lot of value, a lot of value for the human body, and you can develop a tremendous physique and move objects very safely that way. I don't think we would have gotten to the place that we've gotten as human beings if the body didn't adapt to moving heavy objects in what would look as not non-optimal movement patterns. And I'm not trying to call out Andrew Hiller here, because Andrew Hiller obviously has his own very strong opinions about when people are squatting, what they look like. But when Andrew Hiller called out Jason on how he was squatting, so Jason filmed the video of himself squatting with his shirt off with bare feet, and he was leaned over and kind of putting his hands on his thighs and moving up and down through a range of motion of a squat. The mistake that was made in evaluating that, first of all, the guy isn't moving at a competition. He's in his fucking garage. He's in his garage moving. Yes. Look at Jason here. Are these squats textbook anatomically correct from a training perspective squats? No, they're not. They're definitely not. This is not what you would see if you opened up the CrossFit Level 1 manual or the NASM manual or the CSCS manual. These would not look like the squats that you saw. But if you take a step back here and you think about how Jason is moving here, there's nothing wrong with how he's moving here with his own body weight. And if you put him down on a couch, if you sat his butt down on a couch or on a bench, and when Jason goes to stand up, human beings don't stand up the way that it looks in a textbook. They stand up doing the exact same thing that Jason's doing here. You go from the seated position, you roll yourself forward, you probably put your hands down on your thighs, you press through your heels, and you're standing up with a slightly rounded back. So this whole fundamentalism that's getting promoted about, like, if you do a squat, you have to do a squat in the perfect conditions, with the perfect foot position, with the perfect natural S curvature of your spine, squatting to the perfect depth below parallel. It's all fucking nonsense. It's all nonsense. These guys don't know what they're talking about in terms of natural human movement. And I understand the whole goal. I'm sorry that I'm ranting right now about this, but this really bothered me. It really bothered me because it's just so off base. I get it. If he had a 315-pound barbell on his back, he probably wouldn't be moving like that. But that's not necessarily always the goal of how you move, or even how you move when you're moving your body through space not in the gym. So all this being said, I think that these types of movement patterns have a tremendous amount of value, and practicing them and moving through range of motion that maybe, yeah, if I had a heavy barbell on my back, I probably wouldn't be moving like this. But if I had to pick up something really heavy from the ground, maybe I would be moving like that. Or if I had to stand up with something on my lap that was really heavy, I would move like that. And I think that we get really wrapped up in, wow, when you move, whenever you move, you have to move exactly like this textbook shows you to move. And I just don't believe that that's true. I believe that there is a tremendous amount of training merit in moving in some of these patterns and these positions, because you always hear stories of people, man. I go to the gym all the time. I got hurt bending over, picking up something. Yeah, because you didn't know how to move that object like a human being moves that object. Again, all right, I'm going to stop the rant there.
How many people are really like saying that though? Like saying that you have to squat perfectly, deadlift perfectly all the time? Because I think Andrew Hiller, that's a shtick. Like
It's 100% his shtick. It annoyed me though. That one annoyed me.
My charitable kind of like evaluation would be that he doesn't even believe that there's anything wrong with that. I honestly think he doesn't. I think that like deep down he's just like,
point.
oh, look at this video. This will
point.
get clicks, blah, blah, blah. Like he knows that Jason's a fucking beast and he's just getting his workout in and he's moving how he's going to move. Jason's also just like never been a textbook mover. Even when he was in competition, he was like never. I've told him many times. I think that's a big reason he was such a big fan favorite, because you would look at him out there and he just made shit look hard.
Slobber knocker, man.
Yeah, he like wasn't moving well. Like Rich, one of the many things that made Rich as impressive as he did was like he would not only win, but he was just like his movement was.
Precise.
It was incredible. It was so,
like watching someone conducting a symphony.
Exactly. And you know, like you always root for the underdog. You want the Jason Khalipa to beat the Rich Froning because it looks like Jason Khalipa is working 5 times as hard.
Yeah.
But
Jason Khalipa was definitely the show up in a hard hat with his lunchbox type of guy, right?
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. And that's why people loved him. That's why everyone cheered for him.
But the thing with Hill, just really quickly before we move past this, the thing that bothers me about him, perhaps, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps it's just the shtick, right? And I have my own little shtick on Instagram. Everybody's got their own little shtick on Instagram. So I'm not trying to say like, hey, don't have a shtick on Instagram. The thing that bothers me about it is like the people that then pile on in the comments, like the people that don't know any better, that just saying like, this is not a squat.
Bro.
yeah. Nice form, bro. Like, dude, your brain, like you're just not even thinking, dude. Yeah. And all of these people then, and again, social media, who gives a shit, blah, blah, blah. But I really think that it does a disservice. It does a disservice not only to the people who are moving, who are just out there moving, trying to get a workout in. If you're starting to call people out for their movement when they're not moving with any load and they're moving in their garage and they're just out there getting some fitness in, I think, first of all, shame on you, because that is a level of like insecurity that I don't even know. Like, it just let the fucking guy move. Who cares? I get it. He's got 500,000 followers and you want to call him out because you're probably going to you'll get some heat out of it. I understand the game. I think calling people out during competition when there's rule standards and sets of rules that demand that a judge watches your reps and you hit certain standards is a whole different ballgame. I am all for that. I am all for, in a competition where you've signed your name on the dotted line to say you're going to try to move a certain way to win some kind of race, then you better move a certain way to win some kind of race. But the whole calling people out who are just training, who aren't in a competition, I think is, especially when it's not any sort of thing that's going to lead them to complete injury or disaster. We've all seen injury or disaster fails in the gym where it's just like, dude, you're going to get yourself hurt. What Jason was doing during those squats, there is 0% chance he would ever hurt himself. What's this comment say?
It's a good one.
Could Jason
Khalipa could kick my ass with both legs tied together and blindfolded. Bro has earned the right to squat however he wants. He could do a quarter squat and I'd still go to bat for him. Keep doing your thing, sir. Shout out Hoofpick 30.
Yeah, shout out Hoofpick. The other thing with this, Gabe, is that there's training merit to partial range of motion.
100%.
There's training merit to partial range of motion. There's also training merit to squatting with your feet directly underneath your hips and developing that type of capacity and developing strength in that position, even if you're not getting below parallel. Because if you think about a human being when they go to jump or be explosive, where do you naturally put your feet in that position? You put
this
them
goes
underneath your
back
hips.
this goes back to like the tier list for hypertrophy movements, and just I feel like there's every school of thought, whether it's you train for hypertrophy, you train for endurance, the CrossFit people, the now like, like train like an athlete people, the like functional patterns people, a lot of these like movement people, like every tribe, and this is the problem with everything, right? Like they have, I feel like, a very myopic view of like the optimal exercises because they all have merit. Like where I would push back on the whole, like, that's not how you're going to pick up or sit down in real life is that the whole reason that you do these movements with a barbell and that you do it in a certain way is because, like you said, it gives you the ability to be more successful when you do have a rounded back, when you are just standing up from the toilet or the couch. Like those things transfer, I think, maybe you didn't mean it this way, but more than I think people get credit to. And I think that like at the end of the day, there's a comment that came in, like who's moving a 150-pound stone in real life? Like the stuff that you're going to have to pick up in real life is meant to be a percentage of what you do in the gym with certain form. And I think that that's where it translates, because for me, it comes down to like, for the average person, what do you want them to do in the gym? Like, do you want them to learn how to be able to back squat and deadlift and do these like big compound movements that have a lot more benefits than just the very specific way you're going to pick something up in real life? Or do you want them to be in there doing just sandbag stuff and just odd object stuff and just like, like curling my back and doing like what a lot of these like, movement functional patterns types of people like, like you see their stuff that kind of looks a little wonky. I get the benefit to that stuff. I do think that for most people, they can just benefit from like some heavy weights
For sure.
and doing that like consistently, going a little bit heavier week by week, just because the benefits to that are tenfold. It's the benefit of you're going to gain a little bit of muscle, you're going to burn fat, you're going to, blunt the ability for you to get injured when you do round your back in the future. Like there's just so much packed into that, where I think that like just working on these like odd movement patterns of how we like actually pick up stuff in real life is almost like too specific. Even though yes, that is how we do stuff in real life, it's almost like too tunnel vision for me, because I don't know, like I think about it, I have to pick up my kids. I have to pick up like, the garbage can's probably the heaviest thing when I load it up on the mule to go take it out. And all those things are a fraction of, what I can pick up in the gym. And what I do in the gym gives me the ability to do that in real life. And it's going to give me the ability to do that in real life for years to come. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm the biggest proponent of every now and then taking a 150-pound sandbag, picking it up and walking as far as you can with it. So much benefit to that. I just don't think that if I'm prioritizing the time that I have to train and what I want to do in the gym, I still wouldn't put that in front of some of these other things with more modern equipment and modern rep schemes.
I completely see your point. I think that I think that obviously the modern gym environment and modern gym equipment, I've utilized it for many, many years. I still go to LA Fitness. I still obviously step into CrossFit gyms. I know how to move a barbell very well. I've been coaching for 20 years. Like I know what it means to move a barbell through space. I think that these are convenience elements for sure. Like it's very convenient, and this is a huge plus for modern gym equipment barbell. It's convenient. You know exactly what to do. There's access to it. You can overload it. You can get to a point where you're moving very, very heavy loads that you would never see outside of the gym. And you can train and you can pack on muscle and you can hit very specific goals. For sure, I'm not trying to take away from anybody who's doing that stuff. I try not to yuck anybody's yum, really, in training anymore at all. I think, though, that respect should go both ways for people who are doing maybe non-traditional training, who might not want to use the barbell, who might want to say, hey, listen, I don't necessarily want to go in and load up a barbell to 315 pounds and deadlift it. I can get pretty close to that same benefit by moving a couple of pairs of heavy dumbbells or a sandbag or whatever. And I don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong with that. And I think that you can build a very formidable physique, a lot of functional strength. I think that you can have a lot of joy and fulfillment through training in a little bit of a different way. And that's really like over the next few weeks, I'm going to be talking a lot more about a program that's going to be coming to the Train Hard app. And it's probably going to be called NT4BS, which we don't have to necessarily explain what that means right now. But it's going to be an experiment for me to see how can I build, how much can I get out of this type of training where I have a couple of pairs of dumbbells, a very heavy pair and a moderate pair. I've got access to a pull-up bar, a dip bar, a couple of resistance bands, and a cardio equipment. There might be some other small pieces there, maybe a PVC pipe, maybe a dip belt that will allow me to overload the pull-ups and overload the dips for sure. I've got a sandbag as well, so that's going to be incorporated. But I'm going to really, really try to make that 90% of the things that I do for my formal training. I'll probably still step into the LA Fitness every now and again, and like just because of personal preference. And I like doing that stuff. So I'll probably add that in once every couple of weeks to go and do something there. But I do think that like if you want to be athletic, if you want to look a certain way, if you want to have a physique that was probably a little bit more closely to what those guys look like in the 1920s and 1930s, where like they take off their shirt and you're like, wow, that guy looks like a fucking animal. That is where I want to go with this training. I just want to see what's possible. And I've never really just focused exclusively on that. And the season of life that I'm in right now, where I'm not competing in CrossFit. I never competed at the ultimate high level, but I'm not competing in CrossFit. I'm not doing that as a main part of my workout training every day. Do I still use elements of CrossFit in my training? Yes, EMOMs, AMRAPs, types of movement flows for sure, movement patterns for sure. There's always going to be reminiscent elements of that in my training. But we're going to put a 3-day-a-week program out there with a 4th optional day with some other stuff on the days that you're not training, just movement-based stuff. And I think we're going to create some people who look like pretty formidable beasts when they take off their shirt. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I'm excited for it to come out too, man. I had a bunch of people email me from that newsletter, and I sent them back like exactly the 3 days of flex that I would follow if you want to do it as a 3-day-a-week, because I'm currently using flex only 3 days a week. We still program it as a 5-day-a-week program. Granted, I'm doing a bunch of running and endurance stuff kind of in addition to that. But in terms of like hypertrophy and body composition goals, like I'm going in and really, really trying to get the best out of 3 sessions, which is why I was excited when I heard that episode and heard that, like, I mean, that's the way it used to be done and 100% can. And honestly, like 3 days a week for me, for that type of training, like every time I have a day where I know I'm going to be doing flex, I'm like genuinely almost like chomping at the bit to go out there and hit it versus ever getting close to like, man, I'm still a little sore. I'm still a little worn down. I'm still a little tough. And I think that, I know that allows me to go out there and put the type of effort that possibly is moving the needle more than not. So that's exciting. I'm excited for that program to come out. And dude, the equipment you mentioned, I mean, I don't think you need anything else. Like I've completely, this cycle calls for some barbell bench and we're working on some absolute strength. So I have been barbell benching this cycle, but I've almost exclusively been doing dumbbell bench in the programming. So even if it calls for barbell, just been doing dumbbell. And I think that it's one of those things too, where you do kind of graduate from the big barbell movements, specifically when it comes to hypertrophy. Like there's so much benefit to the additional range of motion and stretch that you can get with the dumbbells. Like dumbbells, way overrated, and kettlebells to an even greater extent. I think, underrated.
Overrated or underrated?
Underrated.
Yeah, dumbbells are underrated.
Dumbbells,
for sure.
and then kettlebells. And again, it is because you're not going to have the same type of access, especially once you get to like kettlebells. Like the weight jumps tend to be like pretty aggressive, so like you don't have the in-between options as much. But there's so much benefit to all of these different just ways to like load the body and move a little bit differently. But the thing I was going to mention before, and this is where like you and me have very different approaches to nutrition, to training, to whatever. And, we joke around about it and we go back and forth a little bit.
I still love you though, Gabe. I still love you.
Dude, I mean,
man, no hate. You got no hate in the game for
absolutely
you, Gabe.
zero hate. But, one thing that I think is underestimated wildly underestimated. And this is a question that I asked in that email because I wanted people to send back like a couple things about them so I can like give them the actual best suggestion on how to use Flex. And if you're a coach, if you work one-on-one with clients, like I think that this is way underrated and it's incredibly important. It's just like, what do you enjoy about training? Like those were the questions I asked. It was like, what are your training goals? Give me a little bit about your injury history. Like, what are you doing now? And then what do you enjoy about training? It's so important, man. Like if you love cable machines, let's do a cable machine only program. Like,
Yeah.
is there value to doing compound stuff and sandbag stuff and whatever? And again,
Yeah.
doesn't have to be full cable machines. There's obviously so much advantage to doing some things outside of that, like super stable, super controlled setup. But if you just enjoy those things, you should be doing a program that includes a lot of that because you should be so fired up to go and hit the lat pull down and just feel like a badass pulling down some heavy weight and do like low cable rows and just,
Love
if
it.
that's something you enjoy, and I enjoy those movements, so that's why I'm like speaking to that.
I love
Like,
the low cable
you should
row.
do a program that has that. If you love picking up a heavy sandbag and putting a yoke on your back and like grabbing some super heavy handles and doing like strongman type stuff, find a program that has strongman type stuff. If you love like really, really traditional, I want to go 5x5, then 5x3, then 5x2, and like build week over week, find a program that has that. Like it's just, I think that it should go without saying that the most important thing for long-term success with fitness is you genuinely like enjoying what you're doing in the gym and being excited to go in there and do it. You should be excited to go in there and do your 3-day-a-week program with the equipment that you have access to because you're trying something new and you want to prove that, hey, with this equipment and this much time, I can get some crazy results. That's going to fire you up.
For sure.
That to me, I think is just goes wildly understated how important that is. And so many people, it's like, well, this person that I follow on Instagram follows this program, so I'm going to follow it, even though like I don't genuinely enjoy it. Like it becomes a chore so quick, and you're going to either fizzle out or worse, kind of like fall back to going through the motions and just checking off the box instead of going in like, man, I am so fired up for today's programming, and you're going to hit it hard, you're going to enjoy it, and you're going to be that much more, better for it. So I think that that's a key piece.
I agree
And that's
with
going to
you
be different for everyone. And also that's going to be different. Like what it is now for you is different than what it was last year. It's different than
sure.
what it was 2 years ago. And that's important too. Like you don't have to, hey, I used to love this type of training, so I can never change. Like that's silly. So super important, man.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think for me, a lot of this comes back to the idea of like falling in love with the process.
Oh, yeah.
You have to fall in love with the process. The process means that you're continuing to do all the things that you know you want to do or need to do to ultimately get to the result that you want. So it's less outcome driven. There's an outcome element, of course, like you're thinking about like this is the state that I want to be in, but you're not thinking about the necessarily like I'm there tomorrow. I'm there tomorrow. You know that this is a step-by-step process to get there, and that you have to show up. You have to do the things that you say you are going to do, and you have to do that every single day over and over and over and over again. And you have to learn how to enjoy that. You have to learn how to enjoy the incremental increases in, or the incremental steps that you're taking toward getting toward your goal. You have to love that. You have to love it. And it has to be almost part of your lifestyle. The most successful things that you'll do in fitness and nutrition, I think ultimately become part of your lifestyle, become part of who you are. And I'm not saying that it has to define you. I'm not saying that fitness and nutrition have to define you. I'm not saying that you need to be so wrapped up around the axle that like if something comes up and you can't go to the gym, that your life implodes. I think that's an unhealthy way. Personally, I think that that's an unhealthy way to look at training. I also think that you can't be so wrapped up in your nutrition philosophy that like you can't enjoy a slight deviation from the plan, or like if there's a slight deviation from the plan, your life is now in shambles. I think all of that stuff adds unnecessary stress. At least for me, it does. It adds such a level of unnecessary stress to my life, to be so tied to something that if I don't accomplish it 100% the way that it's written down, that it's an abject failure. For me, that has a net negative impact on my entire life. I hate the fact that I used to get so wrapped up around if I didn't PR a workout, or if I didn't, you know what? I learned from it. So I don't hate the fact that that stuff happened, but I learned that this is not the optimal way for me to train. I learned that if putting the workout Fran down on paper in a week in training, 21, 15, 9 thrusters and pull-ups, I could go do that workout right now, and I would do it much, much differently. Gabe's gone, so it's now just me. I would do it much, much differently than how I had done it in the past. When I looked at a workout like that in the past, it was the absolute, I had to PR. I'm just going to continue to talk here. Now it's just you and me, ladies and gents. I had to PR. I had to go as fast as humanly possible. I had to figure out how I was going to make up milliseconds in that workout. And it was a very highly stressful environment for me. Now, if I'm doing a workout that looks or feels like that, if intensity is the goal, I'm still going to try to go hard in that workout, but I'm not going to get so wrapped up in, did I get 3 seconds faster or slower? It's just it's a net negative impact on my life. So, fitness for me now, I want it to be something that adds to the joy of my life. I want it to be something that is not super stressful in terms of emotional or mental strain. I don't like that. I have other things in my life that necessitate my brain to be thinking about them more than thinking about like, oh, am I doing 5 by 7 today at X? And do I need to go 5 pounds heavier than I did last week? And if I don't, is that a failure for me? Like that for me is hard for me to do in my training these days. I am taking like a much more intuitive approach to training. If my dog comes over and interrupts my set and she's like rolling around and wants to play, I'm 100% slowing my workout down to enjoy my dog for a few seconds and then getting back to my training. And I'm not saying that like every interruption to your training, you have to deviate and be like, oh, I have to stop my workout. Oh, I have to stop my workout. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying for me, I've gotten to a point in my physical training where I understand, yes, I'm going to allot some time to doing this and I'm going to work hard during that time. But no, I'm not going to allow myself to be so wrapped up that if it's not the perfect expression of fitness, that it's not good enough, or it didn't check the box, or I have to work out again later because I didn't do X, Y, or Z. That for me was not a super healthy place to be. And I'm enjoying my training so much more. And I think the results also speak for themselves. Like the results from how I'm feeling physically, to how my body is looking, to how I'm performing. I've had a lot of transformation over the course of the past few months approaching training this way. And I'm really excited to share it. But I also think that if what you do works for you, go and do that and be happy doing that and feel good doing that and express yourself through fitness in that way. I don't want to take away from anybody else's experience at all. So if you want to load up the barbell and you want to follow a very linear progression and you want to overload it, by all means, go and do that. I've done that too. And there's a lot of gains that can happen from that. There's a lot of real joy of achieving a new weight on the bar. It's amazing. But there's also other ways to train to develop a really great physique, to have a lot of fun with it, and to not necessarily spend as much time in the gym as I used to spend. I do almost all of my workouts now, with a few exceptions, directly in my outside in the courtyard. If I had a garage, I'd probably be doing it in the garage, but I do it right outside. And I'm taking advantage of being outside in the wonderful weather of San Diego, which really is doing its best impression of Portland, Oregon right now with the amount of rain that we're getting, or the amount of gloom that we have. But hopefully the sun comes out soon.
Yeah, my sessions are now also 45 to 50 minutes tops. The hypertrophy ones, at least. I definitely have some long endurance sessions that I do once or twice a week. And that's been a big change from what used to be easily 60, 75, 90-minute sessions. The current way Flex is programmed, there's always like a range in sets. So it's always like 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 2 to 3. If you do the high end of that, the session could easily, unless you're like literally on the nose and moving from one thing to the other, which can definitely get difficult if you're actually going heavy enough, like you want some time between supersets, it can easily be a 75, even 90-minute session, like all said and done. If you do the lesser of the range, it's meant to be done in under 60 minutes, because I know that's average what people want to spend. But I easily cut out the last superset. I'll easily do, if it is like 3 to 4 sets, I mean, I'm at the point where like 2-3 sets is enough. And I do think that that is like a learned skill, because once I'm already warm, like I have to warm up a little bit in the beginning, but if I'm warm, I know what my working set should be, even if it's another chest movement. I just go right into it.
Yeah.
I don't need a warm up set. I'm going in and I'm going like right to failure, and I need one more set of that and I'm good. And
Yeah,
I'm
you have a very
able
high
to shave
training
off
IQ.
a lot of time.
You have a super high training IQ. You've been
And
training
all
for
that,
a really long time.
all that time stuff comes with like time and repetition. That saves me a lot of time. But again, you know, where we kind of started the episode, I'm spending all said and done, then you're talking about, you know, 45 minutes 3 times a week, 50 minutes 3 times a week really being spent to this type of training. And even though it's not my primary goal now, I'm more focused on this endurance stuff, I'm still progressing in that area. Like the numbers are still going up, even though it's not like a huge focus. Body composition is staying the same, which is honestly like what I want right now. Like I'm not trying to change one way or the other. So yeah, man, it just goes to speak that, you know, if you're putting the intention, whatever that is, it matters a lot less than like frequency of training, total volume of training. And I do think that like one of the things that, you know, we've talked in the past that just is a personality difference is I do think that there's an in-between though, because I used to be the same. I used to be the guy who, especially like in the CrossFit days, like, dude, the leaderboard was life. Like if you didn't get, you knew that it was like a wheelhouse workout for you and you didn't get the top score in the
So
gym.
disappointed.
Like, dude, it like disappointed you. It
So
like
disappointed.
was, and again, I don't think it ever got to like a really, really bad point, but I would be in a bad mood for sure. You would think like, well, my training isn't progressing. Like it would almost be like a reflection of the work you've put in. And it's so silly thinking back on it now, but like you said, you learn a lot of valuable lessons from it. I think that where I still see so much value, and I think a lot of this has changed too, just because my priorities in life are so different. Like even though I have these goals that I would say are mean a lot to me, because they do, and I've always like really appreciated having like, this is something I want to do. I want to run a sub 3 hour marathon. It's very important to me. I like think about it a lot. I want to work towards it. I want to find the best plan that shortcuts my way to that goal. And it like, I'd be lying if I said it doesn't mean a lot. Having said that, you know, I've dealt now with, I haven't been able to run again because I've like plantar fasciitis just kind of like bugging me. And, but it's not a big deal. Like it's not a big deal because like, yes, that goal matters to me a lot. And now it's not going to happen in the time frame that like I would have wanted to, but that's fine. Like I know I'm still putting bricks going towards, and I'm still benefiting a lot. Like I've really enjoyed like spending a lot of time on the C2 bike while I can't run, and I've really been progressing there. Actually, since you mentioned it, I want to do the 10-minute test again and kind of use that as see how much I've improved there. So it has kind of, I'd like to think I've been able to find a middle ground to where these things do really matter to me. And I definitely want a very specific plan that's giving me the best chance of getting there as quickly as possible. All that being said, if the plan gets deviated, it gets deviated. And it's kind of like whatever, and you learn a lesson from it. It's not going to in any way, shape, or form ruin my day. You know, I'll be bummed about it for, you know, a second, and then it's just kind of like, you know, you get a different perspective with age and with family and all of that stuff. And I think that definitely helps. Yeah. But I think that it's to me, it's still very important because I just feel like I feel like I have no direction if I'm not like chasing a very specific black and white thing, whether like I achieve it in the time frame that I want to achieve it or not, because there's many things that I've been like, hey, I'm going to do this by this date. I just don't, for whatever reason. It still feels like if I'm not aiming towards that, it feels a little too wishy-washy for me. And that isn't something that like takes stress away. It's something that adds stress, because then it's like, what am I doing this for? And again, I know there's some people that are going to relate with that. I know there's some people that are going to relate with the other side of things, but either way, I think being self-aware and then using that as fuel by either, if you're the type of person that appreciates having a goal, like put a fucking goal down. And if you're the type of person that like, hey, that stuff really stresses me out, then don't feel pressured to put a goal down because other people around you are doing it or whatever. Like just train and enjoy the process. Like either way, you should just figure out what actually works for you and then just double down on that regardless of what other people are doing around you.
It's so interesting. We share a lot of similar views on training. We obviously have some similar opinions, but also some differing opinions on nutrition. Um, but when you're talking about having these things on like your calendar for, or these things on your goal list of like run a sub 3 hour marathon. First of all, it's super impressive. I hope that you accomplish it. As your friend, I hope that you work towards this goal and that you get there and that you celebrate it and that you put all the work into it and then you enjoy that moment when you achieve it. I'm very, very excited for you for that as somebody who is in your corner. One of the things for me though is like you kind of hinted at, like those goals don't really do a whole lot for me. They almost make me feel more stressed out by the fact that I feel compelled to do things that are unnatural to how I want to live my life. I have to do certain things in training that I wouldn't necessarily want to do. And maybe this comes full circle to what we were talking about, is like you have to enjoy your training. And I'm far more motivated by, I guess, like a vision of my life or a vision of the best version of myself, or the concept of being a very fit and athletic individual. Somebody who, when I step on the jujitsu mats, that like I'm stepping on the mats with intention, and I want to be a dangerous individual in that regard. I want to really train my body to be resilient. I want to be able to go out there and do a number of different things. I want to be able to go out there and body surf in really heavy water, but I also want to be able to come back and do, 15 to 20 unbroken strict pull-ups. Like those types of things all really matter to me, and it's not necessarily tied to a moment in time. It's not tied to like, hey, if I show up to this race on this day, if I don't achieve X, Y, or Z, I know my training hasn't worked. For me, my training, it needs to work for me in a way that allows me to feel a certain way, to feel connected to my body, to feel like I'm on the right path. And those things I think are noble goals for me. They might not work for other people because they might be a little bit too gray. They work really well for me. And wherever I fall short in my own wherever I feel like, or I look at or evaluate my training, I go, oh man, you didn't do your best. It's almost always because my discipline has lapsed somewhere. Not because I don't know what I should have done. I know exactly what I should have done. I know exactly that I should have picked up the heavy dumbbells that day and worked for X number of time. And if I didn't do that, the reflection on it is almost always, man, you didn't have the discipline to make the decision that you should have made. You should have gotten a training session in today. You knew that you had the capacity to do it. You knew you had the time. Maybe you didn't feel like it a little bit, but you went the direction of comfort over going the direction of taking you a step closer towards your goals. And I think that that's, for somebody who wants to have a methodology of training or a direction of training like I have, that's the danger here, is that you can easily start making decisions that, oh, it's not a formal plan, so I don't have it written down exactly what I was going to do today, so I'm going to I don't have to do it. I'll do it later type of deal. We're going to have a plan for this program. For NT4BS, there's going to be a plan. There's going to be 3 days a week that are going to be a full body upper and lower push-pull days. That you're going to have exactly written out with rep ranges and set ranges of what I'm training that day to do. And I think that that's also going to give me a little bit more direction in this, even though the ultimate goals will still be a little bit more, hey, we want to have a fit and healthy lifestyle. We want to have a physique that's lean and athletic and strong. We want to think about training in this way. But we're going to take some elements from the other side and we're going to pull them in with a little bit more of a formal written plan to get there. And I'm super excited about it.
I'm super excited, man. So stay tuned. I'm sure more information will come out soon. But yeah, man, it's going to be good. It's going to be good. I think I know a lot of people are looking for something exactly like that, whether it's because of the minimal equipment, which honestly isn't that minimal. It's just like super high impact stuff. Like if you were to start investing in like a couple things to have handy to get like incredibly fit, like I think that's the list. Like, I don't know if I would do anything different.
What would your desert island answer be here? For if you could bring, let's say, 2 items you could bring 2 items to a desert island, what would you bring? And you could say barbell plus weight set. I'll give you that as like an item if you wanted.
I dumbbells in a pull-up bar, like heavy dumbbells in a pull-up bar, like probably like a pair of 60s in a pull-up bar for me. And that's like, I don't know, assuming that there isn't something easily on the deserted island that you can like vertically pull from, then maybe I would pick something else. But in terms of like equipment, I think that covers so many of your bases. You can just do so much lower body stuff with a pair of dumbbells.
Yeah.
And being able to push pull upper body, specifically vertical pull, because you can do so much horizontal pull with the dumbbells. But I mean, I like, what would you do differently than that?
So if you had the ability to bring, like, obviously, if I said a pull-up rig and a barbell and a weight set, if that all counted, like that, you're probably foolish not to bring that, because you'd have so much access to like so many movements, and like the training variety would be insane. And if you're truly on a desert island, you're gonna fucking go insane if you didn't have like the ability to do that stuff. But if you were doing like a baseline answer to this, like a really face value answer, only 2 things that you're gonna bring, I'd probably bring a pair of rings, because the pair of rings, you could find places to hang it and do pull-ups. You could also lower the rings down to a spot where you could do dips. You could lower them all the way down to do FLR. You could do ring push-ups. So the rings become a really dynamic training tool that I don't think you get the same benefit from that you would a pull-up bar.
That's a good point.
A static pull-up bar, the rings would probably work better. The other thing that I would bring would be a pair of heavy dumbbells. I'd probably bring a pair of 70-pound dumbbells. You'd be able to do a lot more stuff with like a single dumbbell that you wouldn't be able to do with the doubles. The doubles would give you the ability to do a lot of heavy tempo stuff. But even with just those 2 items, and if you're gonna like sprint on the beach with your shirt off like Rocky, you'd get pretty jacked.
You'd get super jacked.
You'd get super jacked. You're just cracking coconuts open and, you know, standing there with your island wife having the best time of your life.
Man, that'd be a fun like month-long challenge. Be to just do something with like pair of rings and a pair of dumbbells.
Dude, when I worked for Again Faster, so way back in the day, I worked for a company called Again Faster, and we used to joke, we'd be like, we'd be out of business, and they are out of business. We'd be out of business if people understood how little equipment you need to actually get super, super jacked.
But
necessity
again,
is different from want.
And that's again, completely disregarding what we were talking about before, which is like enjoying the training is the biggest piece of like being successful with training. Yeah. Like, sure, if you can control the fact that, they're going to adhere to the plan 100%, yes, they're going to get super jacked. But I think the biggest hiccup with that plan for most people is you're just going to get to the point where they're like, this is fucking boring. Like, this sucks. I don't want to do this anymore. That's tough.
To be honest, that's in terms of this program and thinking about programming it, that's the thing that I want to be really careful that I avoid as a programmer, that I'm still giving myself and whoever's following this program enough variety in the program where it's like, it's exciting. Like it's exciting to go outside and look at your equipment and go, okay, cool, we're doing something like this today. Because the amount of variety that you can get from a traditional gym set of equipment is obviously, it pales in comparison on the opposite side. Like there's no comparison. There's so much variety. And you could argue too much variety, right? Like too much stuff that doesn't allow you to actually progress the way that you'd want to progress. You could make that argument, but it's cool that we're going to offer 3 programs, man, that I think depending on your goal, if you're out there and you're listening to this podcast still an hour and 10 minutes into it, first of all, congratulations. Second of all, we're going to have 3 programs that are going to be really, really fucking great. Train Hard Daily is a fantastic program if you want to be like a human weapon. If you want to be somebody who has a very well-rounded set of skills developed with a pretty all-inclusive training template across the 5 or 6 days that it's programmed, Dennis Marshall does a fantastic job of putting out a program that you can turn yourself into a really highly capable individual. And that's the program that Jason follows on a daily basis. The proof is in the pudding for Flex. Gabe, one of the things that when you took that program over, man, you really elevated it to a new level in terms of producing a tremendous physique. The results that you've had from Flex are astounding. And I commend you for following it very, very closely, for walking the walk, for putting out a program that over the course of 5 days a week, people can get a very, very good bodybuilding workout. And not just a bodybuilding workout that's going to make you a display model only, but Gabe still has the capacity to do these amazing things cardiovascular wise. Going to run a 3-hour marathon, sub 3-hour marathon. Been competing in half Ironmans and all this kind of stuff. So train hard daily. You want to be a weapon. Flex. You want to look amazing and also have capacity. And then we're going to have NT4BS, no time for BS, no time for bullshit. And I think it's going to be a program that maybe some people will dip into and say like, hey, I have a few weeks that I'm just not feeling doing whatever. Come over here and try it out. But from a long-term training perspective, if you want to look like an athlete, you want to feel like an athlete, you want to take your shirt off, you want to be really proud of the body that you got underneath that thing, I think this program is going to be pretty life-changing for people. Because it's been life-changing for me to experiment with it. So I'm really excited. Anyway, check out the Train Hard app. Jason's not on the podcast right now to give the pitch, so I'm going to give it. We have an awesome community of men who are out there grinding every single day, waking up for accountability, for partnership, for brotherhood, for whatever you want to call it. The community section is absolutely popping off. It's crazy to see these guys posting every single day about their lives, about the things that they're going through, about the positives, about the stuff that you might struggle against a little bit. It's a really, really special place. So check it out. Train Hard app. That's what we do.
Dude, some of the messages recently in the community tab and emails that have been coming in, specifically because we're recording this like 2 days before the end of our first challenge. I could never have imagined that. I mean, that's not true. I think that optimistically, I think we all believe that there would be some really, really impactful transformations way outside of just like fitness, how you look, how you feel, like all the stuff you would want with a fitness challenge. But just some of the stuff people have posted, man, and sent in through emails has been
unbelievable.
Just incredible. Incredible. Life-changing. Like not life-changing in like a cliche, obtuse way, but like just life-changing. So
yeah, undeniably better men. They're better men.
100%.
You started the challenge somewhere, and 44 days into the challenge, you're a fucking better man. And you know what? I'll take it at face value because they're posting pictures, they're posting comments, and I believe that a lot of these are genuine. Of course, behind closed doors, you could be doing whatever you want. But the type of community that we have is attracting a certain type of man. It's attracting a person who wants to be that guy. We're trying to create a community of that guy. And it's really fucking awesome to see people be better partners, be better neighbors, be better community members. And oh, by the way, I started doing these burpees, 45 burpees a day, and it took me 10 minutes. And now I'm doing it in sub 3 minutes. That is incredible. I'm getting like goosebumps over here. The physical transformations of some of these guys, man, and it was simple stuff. 45 burpees a day. So simple. 45 burpees a day. 45 to 50 grams of protein in your first meal. You're not drinking for 45 days, and you're going to get a workout in mostly every day. And if you're not getting a workout in, you're going to walk or do your burpees. That was the challenge. That was the challenge. And it produced amazing, amazing life-changing results. In the gym, for sure. We got the progress pictures to prove it. The messages and the message boards and the things that we're getting over email and DMs and all this kind of stuff is a whole nother level. I mean, this thing, I think it's going to explode. I think if you wanted to get into a community of like-minded men who are going to train really fucking hard, who are going to take no excuses, no bullshit, and you wanted to be a part of that, you should join Train Hard now. Because in a few months, this thing is going to blow up, and we're going to have an army. Join it now.
Let's go. We'll drop the mic on that note. Thank you guys for joining. We'll probably have the big guy on next time, and Dennis as well for the full home team. But today you had me and MDV. That was a good combo, MDV. Thank you, and thank you everyone who joined. See you guys next time.